Spring is right around the corner, and today we're going to talk about early crops that you can plant several weeks before your last frost. I'm Josh from Terra, and it's my goal in this video to help you get a better understanding of what crops you can plant in the early spring before your last frost. We're going to focus on the crops that can go in 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost. And that timing is based on your hardiness zone. Where we live here in Kansas City, we're right on the edge of zones 6A and 5B. The Terra garden is in 6A, and if we drive 15 minutes north up to where the garden annex is, that's actually zone 5B. If you'd like an episode explaining hardiness zones, leave us a comment below and we'll break it down in detail. If you think this episode will make your spring garden more successful, locate that like button down below and give it a click. I'm going to break the episode down into 2 groups based on the timing of which the groups are sown in the garden. We'll call those Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1 is the first in and the most cold hardy. These are mostly the big leafy green items like kale, collards, radishes, spinach, lettuce, and turnips. Some of these you can eat the root and the leafy green. The timing for these is approximately 6 weeks before your zone's last frost. For us, that is next weekend. Peas, onions, and garlic can also be planted at this time. And maybe even a week earlier, depending on your climate, for onions. Garlic, in our opinion, is best planted in the late fall and overwintered. We have a video that we did on that last year. If you want to go and take a look at that, I'll put a link down in the description. Here's a little proof of the benefit of planting your garlic in the late fall. We took a peek in on ours that we planted last November, and as you can see, it's already starting to poke up through the top cover. I think a good measure for timing also is being able to work the soil. If it's 6 weeks before your last frost and the ground is still frozen, then it's probably best to wait a little bit longer. Today's 27 February, and it's supposed to get 55 degrees today, but yesterday morning it was 8. According to the predictions, our last frost here is supposed to be 18 April. And if we count back 6 weeks, that's next weekend, we should be able to start putting some of our plants in the ground. Today, I'm not sure how far we can dig down before we hit frozen soil. So I brought out a trowel, so let's take a look here. I get about a half a trowel down, and it's solid. The average soil temperature that these seeds are looking for good germination is around 40, and I don't think that we're there just yet. Let's get the thermometer here and get it in. It started at about 76 in the sun. And we'll let it set. Yeah, it goes right down to 32 degrees. We'll do this same check next week, whenever that timing is right, and see if we're at that about 40 degrees and if we're able to work the soil. We want to be able to get down at least 6 or 8 inches to be able to turn the soil a little bit and get those seeds in. Another part of Group 1 is the brassica family, and that's the broccolis, cauliflowers, cabbages, and Brussels sprouts. And these can go in at that 6 weeks prior to the last frost mark, but they're best put in as transplants. So you would start those from seed 4 or 5 weeks before that mark. So for us, that would have meant starting the seeds indoors at the very beginning of February. So it's that time of the show where we ask for subscribers. The more people that subscribe, the faster we can move the channel forward and get more content your way. So please consider subscribing and click the bell icon so you get notified when we drop new content. Now let's take a look at Group 2. This includes beets, carrots, potatoes, Swiss chard, and parsnips. These all go in at that 3 to 4 weeks prior to the last frost mark and are all direct sown right in the garden. Potatoes are really the only exception because they're planted with a seed potato and not a traditional seed. We'll attempt potatoes again this year in containers. Last year's harvest was a bit disappointing, but we learned a few things and we're going to try to correct those this year. If you want to see that successful failure, go back and watch that video. I'll post a link down below. Beets and carrots are going to make a big showing in the garden this year. I think I have 6 or 7 different varieties of carrots in different sizes and colors. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Now let's get into some of the details beyond just dropping seeds in the dirt. Just because these plants enjoy some cold temperatures doesn't mean that they're ready for hard frosts and deep snow. If a frost or a snow is in your forecast, then you need to protect your young plants from these hard conditions. This is when you bring out a frost cloth, insulated blanket, or a plastic tarp to cover these plants during that time. Another factor to take into consideration is if you're putting your plants in containers. During these colder temperatures, the soil in the container is more susceptible to freezing because of the wind and the exposure around the container. So you may need to insulate around the container during this early season, or maybe even starting them indoors under a grow light. But having your plants in a container in the 6 to 4 weeks before your last frost is going to be a little bit different than sowing directly into the ground, where you get a little bit more insulation from the surrounding environment. Getting your early spring garden in is important if you want good yields and the best taste out of these vegetables that we talked about today. Taste is extremely affected by the cold temperatures. If you want the sweetest peas, then get them a little chilly. Do you want big heads of lettuce, broccoli, and cabbage? How about huge onions? The key is start early. If you've hung out with us this long in the episode, please click that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Put on your jacket and get an early start on making a better Terra.